When I started looking at fundraising, I was reading some articles in one of the magazines, and there was a comment from a lady called Julia Unwin, who's currently chairing the inquiry into the future of civil society. Basically talking about government won't solve all our problems, so what are we going to do? We're stuck in a parent and child relationship with government as the daddy we go to. At the moment, charities are using their own resources to subsidise public service contracts, but how long can it continue? So there's a lot of big changes are going to need to come, but I'm not going to talk about those changes. I'm just going to talk about basic fundraising at the moment. And I'm sorry to say I'm not the person who had the lottery ticket that won 58 million last night. No, I haven't got a magic wand, I haven't got a lump sum of money. But I want to sort of just go back to basics when we talk about fundraising. And probably the key thing is asking. Some of the charities are doing some wonderful work, but they are society's best kept secret. You need to ask. Be clear on your website. You know, I've been on websites where you can't actually see where to donate or what they want to donate. There isn't even anything on the front page about donations. So make sure it's clear. And make sure it's easy. I went to make a donation to a charity. I'd seen some of the work they're doing and I was really impressed. And it was a nightmare making the donation. I actually reduced the amount I was going to donate because I was worried it wasn't going in the right place. So they lost out on that. So make sure that it's actually clear and easy. Make it clear why you're asking for it. Why do you want the donation? And what do you need funding for? So let's talk about what you do and the impact you're having. People are more likely to donate if they can feel an affinity for you, what you're doing. Ask your existing donors to help tell your story. You know, they've donated to you, maybe they can encourage other people to do that. And your staff and your beneficiaries, your best ambassadors. They see what's happening on a day-to-day basis. Give them the tools to ask the right questions. Don't be frightened to ask. You know, you do get the people out there that say, well, I'm not going to give money, they just pay it on salaries. Well, the services that charities are delivering are quite complex. They need to have the right people doing the right job, and they need to be paid to do it. Because if you ask that same person, well, will you do the job for nothing? They'll say no. So don't be frightened to ask, you do need. I talk about you being clear about what you want. The foundations that are making donations are very clear about what they want as well. So to carefully read what they're asking for. And if the foundation says, we donate to charities in Manchester, and you're in London, there's no point, you're wasting time. So look at their information properly. Your trustees' report is crucial. It tells your message, it tells your story of what you're doing and why. A question that we suggest that people ask, and we ask within my own charities where I'm trustee, if your charity was not here, what would happen? Well, that's a good starting point when you're asking for grants and donations. Getting to the message, if we're not here, this is what happens. This is why you need to help and support us. Understand your donor's world and behaviours. People give in different ways. The youngsters like to use digital platforms to give. They're happier doing something on social media. They like doing events. You're not going to get me abseiling or climbing a wall to get money. I'm the one that will make the sponsorship. But it's knowing who the right donors, how to approach them. And we'll talk about some examples shortly. But it is important that you do embrace digital platforms. This donating on their phones is successful. It needs to be looked at. Make sure your website is up to date. Funders and donors will look at your website. And if it's talking about an event that happened 2 years ago, they're going to think you aren't doing anything anymore. You're almost better not having a website than a website that isn't up to date and full of what you're doing and achieving. Obviously get the real life stories. You've got to be confidential, you've got to be careful with names and pictures, but get those stories on of how you've helped and the difference it's made to those people. Let them have their say, how they felt about their involvement. As I said before, on peer-to-peer recommendation, give donors and volunteers and beneficiaries the opportunities to provide their experiences and testimonies. Look at building relationships with corporate partners. Not only do you get access to a pool of potential volunteers and some money as well, you could be tapping into their network. But do be careful on relationship with corporate partners. Don't get the wrong one, and make sure you do review them. There is a charity commission, one of the CCs whose number I can't remember, that actually talks about those relationships. I'm trustee of a local age UK, and we had the upset where we landed up, not us personally, but the organisation, on the relationship with an electricity provider. You do need to be careful, and you need to consider them and make sure they're always up to date. I think people engagement, you're looking for things that people makes you more visible and encourages a range of people, getting the right story. I'll just tell an example within my own office. They select a charity that they want to support. They usually come up with about 3, and then they get their colleagues to vote on which one they want to go for. And this particular year they had 3, and they invited each of them to come in and talk a little bit about what they did. And one of the charities was a homeless charity. And the feeling is, I don't know why they're on the list. It's their own fault they're homeless. It's their fault they take drink and drugs. Well, the lady came in, the chief officer, and the others had come up with their PowerPoints and everything, and she just sat down and she looked at them, and this is about knowing her audience, and told the story of a lady that had been in a car accident. And a result of that had brain injury. She had a loving family, husband, children, but because of the brain injury, she couldn't cope being at home, and she landed up being homeless. And you could see the changes in the faces in the room when they realised that could be any one of them, and all their previous preconceptions were totally wrong. So again, it's about understanding your donors and getting the right story out to impact on them. I've got 3 examples here of people that have actually considered their donor pool and looking at their engagement. The first one is Prostate Cancer UK. Now, that's the male issue. So they approached the sporting arena, advertising, match day collections, programme features, key football clubs, talk sports. So they're working with influencers who aren't necessarily part of the charity, but actually getting to their key people they want to help. They gain new ways and ways to promote their brand and increase their fundraising. With the MS Society, they had a campaign called Kiss Goodbye to MS. 2/3 of MS sufferers in the UK are women. So their goal was to reach women aged 20 to 45, encourage people to give up a bad habit or favourite luxury during the month of May. They used a lot of digital, because again, it's that 20 to 45 that are on digital. And they had this idea of Kiss the Hand, which was a visual interpretation of kissing and waving goodbye. They had selfies and encouraging high-profile performers. Now, the sums raised were modest, but they did exceed their expectations, and they actually reached a lot more people and raised their profile, so there'll be a long-term impact on that. And the final one to mention is motor neurone disease, and you all know about the Ice Bucket Challenge. A lot of people got involved that didn't actually realise what they were supporting, but their problem wasn't how much, it wasn't, how can we raise enough money, it's what do we do with all the money when they raised it. So it was an incredible one. I don't know what the next big thing to do is, but it's actually thinking outside the box, thinking about the people you want to approach and coming up with something that will actually whet their appetites. You're all going to be competing for the same money, and this is one of the big problems you've got. So it's how can you look different? How can you stand out? And are you approaching the right people? Mark mentioned the story about a charity that had found out sort of after its year end that they'd lost their funding. I had a charity that came across a few years ago where a lot of their funding, most of their funding was from local government grants. And they'd almost gone nearly sort of 6 months, 7 months into the following year expecting the grant to come through. The grant had been cancelled, but nobody had actually told them. So one of the things I say in that is keeping communications channels open with your funders. If there's going to be a problem, you know sooner rather than later. In this case, it definitely isn't. Silence is golden. It's really, you need to know what's happening. Make sure you are delivering what's required. They still could pull funding, but if they know you're delivering, if they understand the impacts, they might stay with you. Be careful when you do read the requirements that you are delivering what they want. And if they do want reports every 3 months, you are delivering those reports every 3 months. Because if you don't, you might find you're not getting the funding. Look at what you're achieving. Funders want impact. They don't need a big glossy impact, 10 pages, but what is actually what you're doing having an impact? Is the money they're giving you going to actually do something, or is it just going into a bottomless pit? One of the key things here is making sure your accounts are up to date and they're registered with the relevant bodies. Funders will look on the Charity Commission, and the Charity can be very helpful, because if your accounts are late, it clearly says they're late. It's not hidden, right? It's in red. So your funders are going to say no. The other issue is if your accounts aren't very good. One of the ones I'm trustee is the Association of Charity Independent Examiners, where we're trying to get the level of independent examination up, but also make sure the accounts are right. Unfortunately, accounts are still going in that are not right. And if your funders are looking at them, that'll be another reason. They get so many applications, they need a sieving process, and it's easy to just say, well, they're not right, they'll go. I mentioned there, this happened when the lottery funding came in. Everybody was so excited when the lotteries first come in, and I've got 3 years of funding. Then they got to the end of the 3 years, thought, well, where are we going to go now? You need to start looking for funding the day you start, if that project is going to be sustainable. I think you need to be open to change. One of the things that's hitting our sector at the moment is we need to look at different ways of delivering things. The way we've done it in the past is not always going to be suitable. I'm trustee of an Age UK local one in Medway, and we've got various day centres. And one of the things we know is I don't want, when I get to 80, to go to a day centre to play bingo. So what we're challenging our staff at the moment, and our team and the trustees, is what is the different thing we're going to need to do? What are going to be delivering? Because if we don't change and adapt, we'll be needed, we'll be obsolete. But there's still a need to support older people, so we need to understand what that is. The last thing I mean, plan for eventualities, scenario planning. It is so important to do this scenario. When we were looking at our reserves policy, one of the key things we said is what happens if our grant funding disappears. So we actually built our reserve policy around that scenario. Some other things we had as well. We got the policy, within 12 months that funding had gone, but we were ready. I'm going to talk, I'll come back to that, briefly on diversification. There are a lot of shops. We've got a shop, it's a brilliant source of income for us, but we're aware we've got it on a good place, good footfall, the rates aren't too much. But when you're looking at shops, consider the rental. If your shop is in a subsidiary, you don't get rates relief anymore. That's one of the areas they're sort of clawing back their money for local authorities. Staff costs are going up with minimum wages. You need to consider that. They are good, but I've also seen where actually the charity shops aren't generating anything because they're only just about covering their costs. If you've got surplus premises, think about renting them out. Obviously, if you've got lease, careful about leases, arrangements and responsibilities, but it's something to look into. Do events. They're a good way, but again, ensure you do your budgets. Because if you do a lovely dinner and it's going to cost you 6,000 and you're going to get 100 people, and you don't get your 100 people, the actual event could land up costing charity money, which is not good. So you need to make sure you can cover your costs. Is there a get out of jail clause if the numbers aren't coming up? I did go to an event where they had a dinner the other week, and I took some of my staff along to it, and there was the big proviso, if we're playing football that night, we can't come. Fortunately we weren't, so they got to come. But that sort of thing, these things can happen, you need to think about them. Building relationships up with solicitors and undertakers are quite useful. Legacy income is very important for a lot of charities. It is drying up a bit at the moment. That is partly because people are living longer, but people are also not making the legacies in the same way. Sometimes the solicitors will get asked, well, we'd like to put something in our will for a charity, do you know any local charities? So if they can't recommend charities, but they can maybe give a list. If they don't know you exist, they're not going to know to say about you. And the same with undertakers. The other thing to be careful, Age UK Medway is an independent charity. But if the will says, I want to make a donation to Age UK, it doesn't come to us. It goes to Age UK in London that does different things to what we do. So it's making sure that if you are in this situation, that people know to put the full name in so it does come to where they really want it to go. I'm just going to mention one thing here, and you'll see this in there. It's about telling your donors about maximising their IHT relief. So if you've got an estate, and there's an example here with an estate of £500,000, if they donate 10% to charity, then the estate, the IHT is 36%, not 40%. So if they don't make any charitable donations, the inheritance tax they're going to pay on this example is £70,000. If they make a 10% to charity, then they're only paying £56,700 to the government. Now, they will lose out, the beneficiaries will lose out the sum of £4,200, but the charity is going to gain by £17,500. So sure, it's better for the charity to gain than the taxman to gain. But it is worth reminding donors of that. And the final thing on our diversification is joint working. Those of you working in the public sector, the local authorities are now giving out bigger contracts. So the contract that you maybe were looking at before dealing with elderly people, all of a sudden they've added on dealing with children. So we can't deal with children, our charity is to deal with the elderly people. So we've got to work with other charities to actually deliver that contract, and that is tough. Because is the other charity going to live up to your standards? You know, who's going to be the lead? So if you're going into these, don't get overexcited that there's a contract here we can all bid for loads of money, but making sure that contract is right and can be delivered by all of you to the right quality. The next thing is trading. Obviously you can trade. If your income's under 2,000, there are limits to what you can do, where you can only do trading up to 5,000. That's income level, not surplus. It goes up to a maximum of 50,000. There are some opportunities, subsidiary company, community interest company, but these subsidiaries should be sustainable, self-sustainable. They shouldn't be supported by the charities. And I do see where these aren't doing very well, and the charities are lending them money. That's probably not a good use of charitable sources. They need to be sustainable. They need to be able to cover their own costs. If they're using part of your building, that they can cover those costs. Just as an extra thing about I haven't mentioned there, it's about consider about fundraising code of practice. There are a number of charities that are now registered with that, and they're using that as to help with their funding. So they've actually seen that they've got policies in place. They do take fundraising seriously and act properly with it, and that's a good thing when you're looking for funders. But the final thing I've got on here is do it differently. Can you deliver what you're doing in a different way? It isn't just about money. It could actually save you costs. If you're looking at innovation, there are some funders out there who fund innovation. They're quite pleased about that. But it's actually looking about sustainability going forward, delivering the right service for your beneficiaries in the right way. And it's a challenge. You know, I had a day where we all discussed different things with the elderly, or lots of elderly organisations together to discuss what we could do. And it was a challenge to think differently. Interesting, the one thing that came out of it was we were dealing with scenarios 70, 80 and 90 and different things happening. And when we got to the end of the 70s and going into the 80s, one of the younger people in the thing said, I should have planned better for this. So this is all about doing your planning and making sure we're sustainable for the future. Thank you.